What? Spider-Man Homeward Bound Alone in New York at Home wasn't nominated for any Oscars, even though it had not one but two elderly Spider-Men fighting several elderly spider villains? That's it, I'm canceling my Academy subscription. Ahoy there! Welcome back to Storytime, and welcome back to MCU Retrospecticus. This is part 11, which means a few things. First, that we're now officially over the hump in our quest to decode the Infinity Saga. Second, that the worst movies in MCU are still before us. And third, that today we get to look at Avengers: Age of Ultron, a movie which, like Avengers 1, is almost a movie.
Oop, no clip. Oop, but we had a clip. Nope, okay.
In some ways, Avengers: Age of Ultron is the best episode in MCU. This is not to say that it is good, for it is not. But it is probably the one to come closest to telling an interesting, emotionally engaging story rooted in the decisions of its characters, some of whom even experience actual conflict and are even allowed to develop.
Congratulations!
For the time being. Don't worry, none of that stuff really matters, so there's plenty of awfulness to go around. I know what you're here for. Avengers: Age of Ultron is a 2015 movie directed by Joss Whedon, who of course was the director of Avengers: The Avengers, and basically led the MCU brain trust. Until he didn't. Also, it sounds like he was only pretending to be a good boy, so... It tells the story of our beloved Avengers, who have, off-screen, founded the Avengers, a private crime-fighting and anti-terrorism syndicate that uses the massive wealth Tony Stark accumulated from manufacturing and selling weapons to fight Hydra and other no-goodniks. Off-screen, after recovering the scepter from Avengers 1 that got stole by Hydra, off-screen, Tony and Bruce Banner use it to make an operating system for a security initiative they had been thinking about. Off-screen, or something. The movie has a bunch of characters. Tony finances and is a leading member of Avengers, a neo-colonialist vigilante group focusing on eliminating Hydra and making the entire world its non-consenting protectorate. When we last saw him in Ironist Man, he had sworn off and destroyed his supersuits to show his love and commitment to his girlfriend Pepper, thus becoming the truest incarnation of Iron Man, but I guess he forgot about that because he's got a bunch of suits again. But it doesn't matter because Pepper doesn't show up anyway and he doesn't appear to think about her safety once he's made a murder robot. Marvel loves women. He is obsessed with protecting the world, which to him apparently means policing it with robots he manufactures and controls. You know, like a hero would. In pursuit of this noble and very legal goal, he creates not one but two entities with the power to destroy the world. Like a hero would. Fortunately, only one turns out evil.
Yep, here's your problem. Someone set this thing to evil.
Steve apparently leads the Avengers in their missions, at least when it comes to fights and tactics and stuff. He has sent his manservant Sam to search for his lost boyfriend Bucky so he can do fights instead. Like a hero would. Other than that, he mostly just wants to be in army again or something and judges Tony for making some really poor choices. Fortunately, the movie has too much going on to have time to revel in his sanctimoniousness. Thor has apparently been working full-time with the Avengers to recover the space scepter so he can take it back to Asgard or something, begging the question of why he didn't take it there in the first place. He also has an expositional vision quest about the Xfinity Stones, which contains no substantive information for us, even though this is now the 6th movie in which they have appeared. When we last saw him, it seemed like he was going to stay with his one true love, Jane, and things with her have, off-screen, been going so well that he doesn't know where she currently is and doesn't think to check on her once the world-ending threat is unleashed, even though he could easily take her to safety. Marvel loves women. Natasha works with Avengers. When we last saw her, she had compromised her cover as a secret agent or whatever, but that has evidently made no difference in her life as a secret agent, so that's good. Also, we get actual real development for her. We learned how she was raised in an abusive Soviet spy school that sterilized her, leading her to view herself as a monster. Marvel loves women. This, while excellent development and backstory, appears unrelated to the ledger she was so concerned about in Avengers 1. Oh well, I'm sure it'll come up later. She also seems to be getting feelings for Bruce, with whom she contemplates running away. Nothing happens, of course, but, you know, take it where you get it with these movies. Bruce works with Avengers, doing science and occasional hulking. In this movie, he helps Tony create Ultron, because apparently being a radiation expert also means you know stuff about advanced computers and AI and whatever. Also, he gets development. His sense of self-loathing is explored, and we learn that he has a thing for Natasha. Unfortunately, this means he is guy number 3 in the movie's I Forgot My Girlfriend Exists club.
What's better than this? Guys being dudes.
Marvel loves women, but I'm inclined to give this one a pass since it leads to interesting development that nothing happens with. Can't be having lustful thoughts in a Disney movie. This is a wholesome place reserved for cataclysmic, world-ending violence and neo-colonial profiteering, not the expression of normal human emotions.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Barton works with Avengers, shooting arrows. With him, we learn he has a family he does remember, and he kind of takes the mutant twins under his wing. Wanda is a girl of ambiguous age from Sokovia, the former Soviet satellite where most of the action takes place for some reason. She volunteers for Hydra magic research and gets red magic mind powers, including hypnosis, telekinesis, and force fields. She wants to kill Tony because his weapons killed her family, joins with Ultron until she finds out he is destroying the world, then joins with Avengers. Wanda's twin brother, who definitely has a name, has all the same traits and motives as Wanda, except he is super fast and gets tragically dead saving Barton, which absolutely no one saw coming. Ultron was apparently the idea for some kind of security initiative Tony and Bruce cooked up. Off-screen, Ultron is created when Tony and Bruce try and, I guess, download and copy the operating system from the Rock in the Scepter and fuse it with the Ultron program? Or something?
We are dealing with science here.
He immediately turns into a psychotic murder robot bent on evolving the Earth, which he decides he will do by turning Sokovia into an asteroid and destroying all life.
Show them, Jerry.
Oh, dear God, no!
Jarvision is a robot made by fusing Ultron's stolen vibranium body with the yellow Mind Stone and what is left of Jarvis, a concoction which is apparently pure enough to wield Thor's hammer, for some reason. He is enigmatic and basically all-powerful, except when he's fighting, because that would break the movie, and says he is on the side of life, which means things.
Things.
Like a walk in the park.
He also signs up for Avengers School at the end. Nick Fury shows up to give motivation and be a Deus Ex Machina, and apparently runs the new Avengers summer camp. The other black guys, who are definitely on the Avengers A-team, show up to support their white buddies in various limited capacities. Someday. And Thanos shows up in the credits to tell us he'll do something himself, which definitely means things.
Things.
Like a kiss in the...
So, we've got our whole gang, back with a weird combination of forgetting everything they've cared about and actually developing in interesting ways. Specifically, we've got the Natasha Bruce thing, which is a compelling relationship based on shared types of trauma and fear, and is so far the only compelling relationship in all of MCU. We hope that by working together they can help each other grow and resolve their conflicts. Of course, they don't get that chance, so none of it matters, but it was nice while it lasted.
You think of the children.
Inner conflict is actually something most of our main cast have in this episode. It's ham-fisted and doesn't really have to do with anything, but it's there, which is good. Tony has a fear of not doing enough to prevent the end of the world, and specifically the death of his friends, who don't include Pepper. Marvel loves women. Steve has a fear of being tied down to a stifling domestic life with a girl who isn't his lost boyfriend Bucky, where he doesn't get to murder bad guys and be in charge of everything.
Oh, gee, I wish I was back in the army.
This, by the way, is portrayed as being somehow sad. Marvel loves women. Thor has a fear of leading Asgard to hell or something. Natasha has a fear of reliving the awful stuff she already went through. It's fine. Women are harder to write for. This is good enough. And Bruce has a fear of hurting those around him. It's a little cheap that this all comes in the form of magic visions from Wanda, but honestly it's more than we've ever gotten or will ever get from the rest of MCU, so be grateful. Each of our main characters has a specific inner conflict they want to work out, which should be the catalyst for action on their part and therefore the plot of the story. And it kind of is, though it almost immediately turns into stopping the villain of the week from doing a thing by punching him. Win some, lose some, I guess. The plot of Avengers Iron Man 4 goes like this. Tony, in order to alleviate his fear of not doing enough to avert world destruction, almost brings about world destruction by trying to create an omniscient police robot without any plan whatever. Twice.
Twice? 2 times.
Maybe that's a little simplistic. I'll try again. The main plot of the movie has to do with Ultron, whom Tony, assisted by Bruce, semi-intentionally creates as a means of ensuring world protection.
Oh, I forgot to carry the wad.
Other Iron Man movies have dealt with the consequences of Tony's foibles or flaws, but this is the first one where his stupid choices are driven by any sort of internal conflict and therefore motivation, which is good? Iron Man 1, of course, pretends to be driven by conflict, but as I've already shown, nothing in that movie happens for any reason at all. And Iron Man 2 and 3 are both about some random thing from Tony's distant past coming back to bite him. So I guess we're moving in the right direction? The trouble is that Tony, as always, immediately commits hard to the first dumb idea he has, meaning that there is no space for developing his conflict. Tony is worried he hasn't done enough to keep the world safe. Great. We need to see this conflict developed a little before pulling the trigger on Ultron. Otherwise, Tony's impulsive decision to make an invincible murder robot is a lot less sympathetic.
Oh, I forgot to
It's clearly the wrong choice, meaning no conflict can come from it in the story. Obviously, the only thing to do is to undo it. We get a scene of Tony explaining himself, but since this happens after Ultron's creation, it comes across as excuse-making, not development. And developmentally, we're 2 or 3 movies beyond Tony's impulsiveness being a valid inciting incident. At least, we would if we lived in a universe where anyone in these movies is allowed to develop, which we don't. We live in boring Uncle Kevin's horrorscape where man-babies are heroes and nothing means anything. But of course none of that matters anyway, because as always there's a giant urgent problem that needs to be taken care of so the world doesn't end.
For gosh sakes, what now?
Existential threats always trump internal conflict, and once Ultron is a thing, everyone's personal concerns pretty much go out the window, and their resolution, to the extent anything is resolved, has nothing to do with the plot. It's coincidental. It also doesn't matter that Tony and Bruce create Ultron. That is, neither experience any significant consequences tied to that action apart from what everyone experiences. It doesn't generate any meaningful conflict between group members. Yes, they have a scene where there is some anger at Tony, mostly from Steve, but that gets forgotten about once it's time to go on adventures and do kick-punching immediately thereafter. The problems with the movie as it is are that 1. All the sources of internal conflict are artificial, coming from Wanda and not the characters themselves. I mean, like, maybe she's, like, dragging stuff up from their subconscious, but it's cheaper than them just expressing these concerns organically. 2. Only Tony meaningfully acts on his conflict, which is immediately forgotten about anyway. And 3. The resolution of the team's conflicts has nothing to do with the plot, making them irrelevant. All of these problems arise because there is no connection between the characters and the plot, apart from that the plot happens to the characters. This, as always, is an unforced error on the part of the storytellers, resulting from bad, lazy writing. Here's a fix. The movie starts out the same way, with the Avengers trying to sack the last Hydra base. Inside, Tony finds the scepter, which it appears Hydra have been at least trying to use as a communication device with something off-world, obviously concerning. When Tony grabs it, it gives him the flash of a vision. Millions of Ataris gathering for another attack or something. Once the gang is back in New York, Tony starts talking about Ultron, a planetary defense network he wants to make. Everyone else is concerned about this, but Tony explains his vision and how it was really just luck they were able to ward off the attack the first time, and how Earth is a sitting duck. He talks about how he is tired of avenging and worried for his and everyone else's safety. He wants to be irrelevant, but wants the world to be safe. Finally, he reveals Pepper is pregnant. As the scene progresses, we can see each person's response. Bruce and Natasha, who it seems might have a thing for each other, see an appeal to the idea of being able to retire. Maybe they could even start again somewhere. Thor knows Earth is massively under-defended compared to the other realms, and sees Ultron as a way to maybe remedy that and bring Earth onto a more level playing field. Barton, as we will learn, has a family and therefore gets Tony's newfound paternal instinct. The only real holdout is Steve, who, as we know, is wary of networks like this, calling back to Captain America 2, but also doesn't really want to get out of the fight yet.
Oh, gee, I wish I was back.
In the end, he goes along with it, but the seeds are sown for more ideological conflict with Tony down the road, which other movies will then not have to invent out of whole cloth. So, the Super Friends agree to make Ultron. They lay out a careful plan, but the variable is the stone in the scepter. They are unsure how it will react, and what ends up happening is that it fuses with the Ultron programming prematurely. Tony sees this and tries to shut down the system, which it perceives as a threat, so its fight-or-flight response kicks in. It kills Jarvis as before, and then hijacks one of Tony's spare robots and takes off. Here's the other big difference. Ultron is not immediately a psychopath, because crazy is not character. He is scared, mostly of Tony and the Avengers, and in a new world. His first priority is his own safety, which means hiding. We see him learn more about Tony and the world through the internet, and see his worldview harden into something more cynical. Meanwhile, the Avengers realize what they've done and are now trying to get Ultron back to either reprogram him or destroy him. When he learns about this, he sees no difference between the two fates, and is not crazy about being controlled by humans anyway, and so his world-ending plot develops.
Crush, kill, destroy.
Jarvision is created as before, though with a little more input from Thor, who has actually learned stuff about the stones. Everyone gets to make a choice relevant to their conflict. Tony has to suit up again to defeat Ultron, breaking a promise to Pepper for the sake of their child. Bruce and Natasha have to choose to not run away after doing so was a very distinct possibility. Steve gets to feel gloaty about being right after the murder robot, and all of them take part in instigating the main external conflict. One more thing. Apart from not having a plot that is tied to anything the characters are concerned with, this movie doesn't add anything substantive to the overall story of MCU, apart from the introduction of a couple new characters. It pretends to deepen the mythology around the Xfinity Stones or whatever, but truthfully only tells us things we already know and that we'll learn more later sometime.
Nothing!
Ultron doesn't mean anything in particular to the world of the story or our characters, and of course the character development we do have for Natasha and Bruce gets forgotten immediately or erased by other movies down the line.
Think of the children. Won't somebody please think of the children?
So this movie is as inessential as it could possibly be, which is stupid since it's like one of the big ones. So, we gotta talk about colonialism again, a conversation which is only going to get less comfy as this terrible series progresses. This is a topic which has already arisen with Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man standalone movies, so it's only natural that a movie with all three of them should feature it as a central element. The fact that, once again, it goes unremarked upon is of course the issue here. To restate, the Avengers is a group made of Western colonialist mercenaries who go around the world without regard for international laws or respect for national autonomy, causing problems in nations other than their own as they effectively turn them into protectorate states. The movie portrays this as good and necessary, even heroic. Which of course is a thing that colonialists do. Remember how we were convinced we were doing the right thing in exterminating and enslaving Native Americans? Let's break it down in ascending order of awfulness. South Korea. Steve, Natasha, and Barton go to South Korea in an effort to thwart Ultron's attempt to make himself a beautiful robot body. In doing so, they imperil thousands of people in the street and on a train. They execute this operation without consulting with or notifying local police or military authorities, and do nothing to repair the significant damage they consequently cause to infrastructure. South Africa. Tony engages in a brawl with Hulk in a large South African city after he and his team engage with Ultron in the outskirts. In doing so, he imperils thousands of people in the street and in buildings. They are again inside the country without consulting with or informing local authorities, and do nothing to repair the significant damage they cause to infrastructure and private businesses. Oh, except sending in like the Stark Relief Fund or whatever to, I don't know, distribute blankets. Sokovia. The Avengers stage a full covert operation to sack the Hydra base located in Sokovia. Then Ultron returns to the base to make his Sokovia asteroid as a direct result of his creation by Tony. That entire city is destroyed. Don't worry, everybody got out. Hope Stark Relief Fund can house, feed, clothe, and employ the hundreds of thousands of displaced refugees its founder helped create. Now, the problem, as always, is not that these things happen in the story. When characters do problematic stuff, it is good for development because they can learn and get better. The issue is that all of these actions go unremarked upon. There are no consequences or even pushback. The worst thing that happens is some bad press after the South Africa brawl, which leads to nothing.
Nothing!
All of these incursions are framed as necessary and just, even though they are only necessary because the poor choices of the colonialists themselves. This is all complicated by the fact that the Avengers are a private organization operating outside any jurisdiction or restraints. They are not a function of some global security council or even a particular nation. They are just a group of people working to accomplish their own ends, regardless of the collateral damage anyone else might receive.
Guys being dudes.
Worse still, the movie knows this is happening this time. It goes out of its way to show that no civilians are dying, and to give us the throwaway line about Stark's relief charity. So the story knows about this stuff and still engages in it anyway. Tony's relief fund is like an oil company that displaces people due to a pipeline failure, helping spearhead charity efforts to resettle those people. It's gross and only necessary because of negligence in the first place. And then, of course, we have the Ultron initiative, which, as I've said several times already, is the plan of one man to make the world secure on his terms. This is not something that he pitches to the UN or like a World Security Council or whatever. It's something he just does. Worse, he does it without putting any kind of thought into it or consulting with anyone apart from Banner. This is supervillain territory, which is fine, except that the movie does not see it that way. It tries to frame Ultron as, if not the right thing, at least not a wrong thing. And yes, protecting the innocent people of the world from an alien invasion is a good thing, but doing so by robbing them of their right to self-governance is not. Ultron is no different than the murder ships in Captain America 2, a thing the movie doesn't interrogate or I think even realize. And it doesn't stop there. The movie's solution to Ultron is essentially to create another Ultron. The movie portrays this as unambiguously good, since the new Ultron can wield the magic hammer, so it's okay. So I guess the takeaway is that an arms race is good if you are the good guy and promise to only use your weapons for good.
From now on, I'll use my gossip for good instead of evil.
The ends justify the means every time, which is, of course, a standby of pro-colonialist narratives created by international megacorporations with gross agendas. People talk about how they like these movies because the heroes are flawed. They aren't like Superman or whatever, they are impure and fallible. And maybe they are in the comics, but in these movies they are inevitably infallible. The movies don't let them make mistakes, ever, because everything they do ultimately contributes to the resolution of the crisis, even if the crisis, as it is in this movie, is entirely homegrown. No one is ever wrong or allowed to grow from poor choices because every choice they make ends up being the right one, or at least justified within the story. Tony should be in prison for creating an AI that killed dozens of people and destroyed a city while attempting to hack the world's nuclear codes, while his vigilante organization endangered more lives while violating any number of international laws. Instead, he just gets to build an Avengers campus somewhere to expand his organization and train more paramilitary operatives so we can sell toys about it in Disneyland. Because that's what heroes do. Here's the rest of what I got about Avengers Age of Ultron. 1. Nick Fury has access to and command of a fully crewed and operational hover carrier. I guess he kept it in his other storage unit he didn't show to Steve after Steve destroyed S.H.I.E.L.D. and forced him to go underground. Crafty Nick. 2. Just like they do in the rest of the galaxy, everyone on planet Sokovia speaks English to each other. Which I guess is good, since that makes the evacuation probably go smoother, since heaven knows the Avengers or even their police robots aren't learning Sokovian, right? 3. Ultron's powers are undefined and confusing. Of note are his, matter magnets? Like, he can just, pull up chunks of asphalt using the Force, which is obviously very dumb. Also, he has a heart and is programmed to feel physiological pain in its removal, which feels cruel.
Why was I programmed to feel pain?
4. In a fun callback to Avengers 1, no one experiences any problems operating at high altitudes. But maybe you didn't watch that video, so I'll recap. The Sokovia asteroid reaches upwards of 30,000 feet, which, as I pointed out already, has an average air temperature of minus 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Including the wind chill resulting from being on a flying thing, that temperature drops to more than 100 degrees below zero. Which means that everyone up there would be suffering the beginning stages of hypothermia, impairing their sense of touch, motor skills, cognition, and breathing. Since there is not enough oxygen at 30,000 feet to sustain human life, and no one has acclimated themselves to high altitudes, the gang, not to mention all the civilians left, would likely pass out very quickly before drowning in their own blood as a result of the blood in their lungs freezing and shattering as they perform strenuous physical tasks. I wrote this off in Avengers by saying that maybe Steve's serum made up for this, but Natasha, Barton, Wanda, and the boy never got serumed, so... 5. We need to talk about vibranium, which makes no sense. In Captain America 1, we are told it is a metal which absorbs all vibration, and is therefore, super strong, I guess. Fine. In this movie, we learn that there is a lot of it in an African nation named Wakanda. Cool. Ultron uses it to construct a non-metal body for himself and to, power thrusters to lift up his Sokovia asteroid. The movie justifies this by giving him a line about how it's the most versatile substance known to man or something, which doesn't cut it. It seems weird to me that it can be a stable metal and also not metal and also a combustible fuel source. Stop making crap up.
We are dealing with science here.
5. I like how Jarvision is framed as this, all-powerful robot god, but he just ends up kick-punching things like everyone else. The Mind Stone doesn't do anything for him except shoot a laser sometimes and allow him to somehow lock Ultron out of the internet like a 90s V-chip. How disappointing would that be? Wow, you have one of the most powerful things in the galaxy stuck in your head. What can it do? Oh, access the internet, maybe make me fly, shoot a moderately powerful laser.
How neat is that? That's pretty neat.
Honestly, there's probably more, but I want to not be talking about this movie anymore. So, in the end, we have yet another unnecessarily mediocre entry into this series. While it does have probably more than the average amount of interesting stuff, what with Natasha and Barton being allowed to feel and explore feelings, ultimately the movie is a jumbled mess that doesn't leave us with anything we didn't have before. No one experiences any meaningful and lasting growth, and the story universe hasn't expanded. I guess the biggest thing is the Avengers moves on from being a startup to a real company. Can't wait to see what their IPO is. I get the sense that Joss was probably reaching for something big on this one. He's been pretty transparent about this movie not being a fun one to work on, and it kind of shows. Part of that might be pressure to top the success of Avengers 1, but part of it might be just frustration in not being able to actually take the story anywhere. Not because there's a plan which is controlling things, but because there is no plan, and the beige overlord doesn't want to be hasty. Or maybe it's because the plan that had been created was going to be scrapped, leaving the rest of the series to more or less play it by ear. I guess we'll see. Anyway, that's all I got here. Join me next time when we'll be looking at Ant-Man. The only proof anyone should ever need to know that the only thing Marvel Studios is good for is exploiting, neutralizing, and processing the creativity of others into inert, tasteless mush. Good night.
Are these morons getting dumber or just louder?
Dumber, sir.